On this eve of Ash Wednesday, also known as Fat Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. Well, the UN Security Council confirms an emergency meeting tomorrow will address the ISIS threat in North Africa. This comes as Egypt pushes for immediate action against the terrorist group. Wyatt Goolsbee is here tonight with more on that. Wyatt?
Brian, the Egyptian president says creating a UN-backed coalition is the best way to rid their neighbor Libya of Islamic extremists. Egypt has been calling for action since ISIS posted a video of the beheading of more than 20 Egyptian Coptic Christians.
The Egyptian military says this week they've successfully bombed 10 targets connected to ISIS in Libya. Officials say their pilots were careful not to hurt innocent civilians, but ISIS claims the airstrikes left collateral damage. Egypt's president says his country had no choice but to act.
What happened is a crime, a monstrous terrorist crime. Our children have their throats cut in Libya, and not to react? No, it's a kind of self-defense accepted by the international community. We will not allow them to cut off the heads of our children.
His country has been retaliating since Sunday for the apparent beheading of 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians on a Libyan beach. But the airstrikes can do little to bring closure to the friends and family of the victims. Today, Pope Francis offered Mass in the Vatican for the 21 Egyptians, saying they were killed for the sole reason of being Christians.
Guidami per amore del tuo nome.
The Holy Father went on to pray for their communities and for the Coptic Orthodox Pope, who he called his brother. High-ranking clergy in the Coptic Church say those prayers are needed.
What we've seen here is a dehumanization of people who are paraded like war trophies and then killed in such a barbaric and inhumane way, dealt with as objects that could be bargained with and bartered with and then ultimately sacrificed to prove a point.
Meanwhile, Egyptians burn incense daily in prayers for the victims and for an end to the violence in the region.
The terrorist presence in Libya isn't the only problem on Egypt's radar. The Egyptian government has been taking steps to fight extremism across the Middle East, trying to form a coalition helping against ISIS and to help Saudi Arabia defend its borders. So, Brian, we will be following developments to see if the UN will take action.
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsbee. And Jack Fiegel is founder and chairman of Orientale Lumen, or Light of the East Foundation, promoting Orthodox Catholic dialogue. Why were these Egyptians, these Copts, in Libya?
Well, I've heard a couple of different reports. One is, which you would expect, that they were there for work and for freedom, perhaps, but mostly for work. There's large oil industry in Libya, and they were probably there. But there's also an ancient Coptic tradition in that region of the world that they may have been indigenous to that territory.
Oh, interesting. So this was a group of more than a dozen expatriates. These are grown men. How would they be captured all at once?
In the Eastern Church traditions, especially immigrant communities, the church is really the center of people's lives. So it's not only a place for prayer, but also a place for social gathering,
it's their community.
Education. It's their whole community. There's a Coptic Orthodox Church here in Fairfax where they have thousands of members where they gather for all sorts of things with daycare and education and so forth. So they probably might have captured them at a church in that region to get them all together.
So it seems like Christianity is doomed in some of these countries. Do you think Christians can still live peacefully in the Middle East? Is there any hope?
I think there is. Christians have been living there for 2 millennia under all sorts of terror, under all sorts of problems with regard to different governments all through the centuries, and they've always found a way to coexist. And as the Pope has called these martyrs through blood, the blood of ecumenism is actually, I think, bringing Christians together in the Middle East amongst all the different denominations to fight this.
They have faced much adversity. What is the main threat that they face now? Is it ISIS?
Well, it seems to be that's the most active right now from what we're seeing in the news. But they've been persecuted by all the governments of the Middle East in all sorts of different ways. And in different countries, we have different Eastern churches, different traditions from Syria to Lebanon to Egypt. So they all face different challenges just to exist. And unfortunately, there's a large exodus where the populations are migrating to Western Europe and here to America.
How similar is the Coptic tradition to Roman Catholicism?
It's similar in basic principles. However, the Coptic Orthodox Church was one of the what are so-called Oriental churches that did not agree to the Council of Chalcedon around the 5th or 6th century. And so there was a difference in thinking of Christ and his two natures that was agreed in Chalcedon. So they're somewhat separate, and there's about 4 or 5 of these Oriental churches, mostly in northern Africa, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Egypt, that have these traditions.
So they have their own Pope Tewodros. He offered a Coptic mass for these Christian martyrs, if we can use that term, as Pope Francis did. What else are you hearing from that region?
Ask just many requests for prayer and support and attempts at trying to understand more of their plight and to perhaps do something with regard to our government to try to make sure that these people can survive.
All right, Jack Fiegel, we appreciate you. Just give us a snapshot of your organization.
The Oriental Lumen Foundation and Conferences was started about 20 years ago after the papal encyclical by that name, and we are a grassroots organization of laity and clergy that meet once a year here in Washington to discuss ecumenical issues between Catholics and Orthodox.
Well, Jack, we thank you for sharing your insight with us.
Okay, thank you, Brian.